Hello, and welcome to the Joy of Cooking podcast. Each week, we set the table for a discussion about recipes and stories from the authors of The Joy of Cooking, kitchen victories and misadventures, and most importantly, what we are cooking and eating right now. We're glad you've joined us at the table today. I'm Shannon Larson, home cook, ardent Joy of Cooking user and fan, and rice and bean enthusiast.
I'm Megan Scott, co-author of the 2019 Joy of Cooking. I'm a food editor by day and avoider of dish duty by night, and I compulsively smell every ingredient before using it.
I'm John Becker, fourth-generation co-author and steward of The Joy of Cooking, America's oldest family-run cookbook. I have a hereditary urge to buy too much parsley, and I think fried shallots make everything better.
You know, I never bought parsley before I met John because, I don't know, I didn't think of it as very useful. I thought it was like a garnish.
Like the curly parsley?
Yeah, like the curly stuff.
You didn't use Italian parsley and things?
No.
Oh.
I didn't grow up, my family didn't use parsley ever, unless it was dried.
Yeah.
On like twice baked potatoes.
I said it's a hereditary urge because my father, Ethan, he would it would compulsively buy parsley whenever he was at the store, and he would always buy the curly kind. He actually really prefers curly to the Italian.
Really?
That's a choice.
It is a choice. I think it has a place, and it's good. I like it in tabbouleh. I like it in other things. But yeah, I feel like we always buy Italian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like that's what we get. Are there things that you always get when you're at the grocery store, though? Like just compulsively, I don't know if I have this at home, but I need to grab it.
Well, parsley, cilantro, green onions, lemons.
Yeah, I always get lemons,
always.
limes, and I always have to grab an onion. Even if I have like 12 onions at home, I'm like,
You might not have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, all it takes is one tragic coming home and having that moment of recognition where he's like, oh, crap.
Yeah.
No onion.
Ugh,
Damn it.
Worst. I don't think I've ever gone without an onion because of that. So there you go.
That's a good strategy, though.
Yeah.
It works. Before we go further, I just wanted to pause for a second and talk about the fact that the podcast had 16,000 downloads last week, which is wild, and also up from like 300 a week.
Yeah.
So thank you for listening.
And welcome.
And welcome. Also, the most downloaded episode was the one where we actually, we had a guest scheduled and then they canceled. And so we ended up just kind of riffing on Joy of Cooking history. And people really loved that one and want to hear more of the history. And we will do that in future episodes. I think we'll probably at some point go through each edition and talk about the history of each one.
I feel like just have a periodic episode about one of the 9 editions that has been published, and just do kind of a semi-deep dive on that.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that. We'll do that in the future. But yeah, what has everyone made this week? Shannon, what did you make this week for dinner?
Well, I mentioned rice and beans because one night I was chosen to be on a jury this past week. And so I wasn't able to actually cook or think about cooking very much because I was in that world. And my husband made just a pot of rice and beans. And I don't know, there's something so comforting about it. And it sounds so plain, but it's just so good. And we use Ali Slagle's recipe on the New York Times where it's just like a one pot and you cook it with onion. And so it's just really flavorful. So that was great and very needed after a long day sitting in a courtroom.
What kind of beans?
Black beans.
Nice.
Yeah, we like a black bean.
Mm-hmm.
We also did congee this week with like tofu crumbles and spinach and mushrooms, and that's always a very
good comfort.
It was like we made pasta 2 nights, including Marshall's hot sauce. Our producer owns Marshall's hot sauce here, based in Portland, and have radiatori, and so we made that with the Joy's chicken piccata, and it worked perfectly. So it was a comfort meal. Heavy week this week, but it was needed.
Sometimes you need that.
All the carbs, please.
Yeah, it will be better this week. That's what I always say. What about you two?
There's a recipe in the 2019 Joy for a tamarind glazed tempe, and it's delicious. It's one of my favorite things to make, period. But it is, you just cut tempe. Well, you steam the tempe first in like the whole block. You just steam it. Which is actually really nice because I'll buy tempeh and throw it in the freezer and then just steam it directly from frozen, so I don't have to worry about thawing. And it also, the steaming changes the texture a little bit and makes it like softer, or I'm not sure how to describe it, but it just gives it more, like it's not dry after you steam it. And then you brown it in a skillet, add a mixture of citrus juices and tamarind and garlic and ginger. and let that reduce down, and it kind of glazes into like this thick, shiny sauce. It's delicious. You can also just use whatever sauce you have. Like if you have a favorite barbecue sauce or like one of those bachan's sauces, you could use that. Probably water it down a little, but whatever your favorite sauce is, just throw that in the pan and then it glazes it, and
What do you
looks
serve it
beautiful
with?
and it's delicious. Usually coconut rice, and this time I made a roasted broccoli and peanut salad, which is from Julia Turshen's new cookbook, which is called What Goes With What.
I've heard about that book.
It's a really
Is
good
it
book.
good? Yeah.
Yeah, it's really sweet, and that's the first recipe I've made out of it.
We also did a few salads. Well, there was one night where I was alone.
Oh, you say that so sadly.
Left to my own devices because somebody had to just abandon
Go
me.
socialize.
So yeah, we had an extra pork chop laying around, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to do a katsu cutlet fried on both sides, and I cut it into fairly thin strips, and then served it on top of a radicchio Caesar with some roasted potatoes underneath because we had a few potatoes knocking around, and then yeah, some chopped Calabrian chilies on top of the pork.
That
So
sounds delicious.
it was good.
It's not bad for a desperation dinner.
I know.
Yeah, not very desperate.
My husband always just gets like frozen chicken wings whenever he's left to his own devices. And it took a long time for him to admit that that was what his like go-to meal was when I wasn't
I
around.
think that's a great solo meal. I don't know what he's ashamed of.
Yeah, no, always keep something like that in the freezer
Yeah.
just in case there's a sad time and you just need that comfort,
Yeah.
need that convenience. We also did like a Vietnamese chicken and red cabbage salad. We've seen this like on menus in several restaurants and always been curious. Finally, just decided to look up a good recipe. And yeah, fantastic. It has Vietnamese coriander or raw ram, shiso, green onion, fried shallots, peanuts, hence the fried shallot comment I made. There was like the recipe I used, which was from Serious Eats, had a nuoc cham, but there was a little bit of ginger in there, which was really
The ginger in there was so good, and I've never added ginger to that sauce, but highly recommend that, especially for that salad.
yeah, it was great. It was, I think that, typically you're supposed to be poaching the chicken, from scratch or whatever for that recipe, but we just used some leftover roasted chicken, and it was a great use of that.
Yeah, we'll make that again.
That sounds great. I plan on roasting a chicken this week. So
Same.
I do, honestly, for the listeners, I have a piece of paper that I just take notes on, like, because I try to go grocery shopping or to the farmer's market after we record. And I just meal plan while I'm here most of the time because of you two and our
strategy.
guests. Yeah.
This week, we'd like to welcome Anna Johns to the show. Anna is a local produce enthusiast with a decade-long career in connecting people with food, including many years working farmers markets at one of the country's largest organic produce distributors, and now as part of a team leading a specialty retail produce department. Welcome to the show, Anna. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
What did you cook this week that you are still thinking about?
Well, on the topic of comfort, our family always relies on spaghetti and meatballs. And so, with the backdrop of everything happening in LA, with family that is supporting their family down in LA, I went to go support the supporters and brought a version of spaghetti and meatballs, which is not the family, what we call Saraceno sauce version. It was like a fresher pasta and a much lighter meatball than our family typically makes, and it was very well received by a 5-year-old who historically doesn't eat food at all. So if a 5-year-old's palate is the indicator that you need to make it this way, that was the endorsement that you needed.
That's a good endorsement.
Yeah,
5-year-olds, famous arbiters of taste.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And this one is pretty exacting in all ways. So yeah, feel good about that.
Well, that makes me want to ask, like, what's the traditional way your family makes that recipe?
So the traditional way is as our grandmother, my maternal grandmother's way. And when I think about that recipe, I think about her sort of, post-depression era, starting a young family. She eventually had 8 children beginning in the early 50s. And so those recipes were really convenience foods at the time. So it was like a lot of, like canned tomatoes and dried oregano and things that just sort of feel commodity now. And that was carried through into her children's version of those recipes. And, we'll often reference which of the uncles, which of the cousins is making the sauce that tastes the most like grandma's. And when I started making that recipe, I took special interest in the component of that sauce that I feel is the most important, which is the tomato, and was like, we're not using Hunt's canned, sorry to the brand, we're not using Hunt's canned tomatoes as the like flavor driver of that recipe. We're going to find like
Heresy.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There's families across the country who hate me now, but really in my experience working in produce, really like took interest in finding the best tomatoes, and so I have a couple that I rely on and will preserve to have on hand at all times. And I think the family is like, well, it's not the Saraceno sauce, but it's really good.
Yeah.
That's good enough for me.
So are you canning the sauce, or are you canning like a crushed tomato or whole tomato?
So all of the above. And I also, and this is, the COVID era brain, there's stories coming out of my deep freeze still of what was going on at that time in my brain. But in like 2020, so these have been, so an endorsement of keeping things in the freezer for a very long time. They're fine. I've had bags and bags and bags of these heirloom tomatoes that in 2020 I had cut in half, slow roasted at 200 degrees for 8 hours because we had all the time in the world then, with like shallots and garlic. And in my brain, 4 or 5 years ago, I portioned them out and labeled them into meal-sized portions, which I have no idea what that meal was. There was no recipe that I was thinking of at the time, and I think that like that's the reason why they kicked around in the freezer so long. It was like, what was this recipe for? I have no idea. But it turns out that that's a really great way to just have these incredible, flavorful, ready-to-go tomatoes that you can just like stick in a pot, heat up. I just blitzed them and then added meatballs to it, and that was like it. I highly endorse it.
I feel like that was the first quote unquote hack that I ever learned about like tomato sauces. Like if you just slow roast them with maybe a head of garlic, I mean, it's almost instant sauce. After we're talking a pretty low oven, and you just let them get nice and concentrated and soft. And
8-hour instant sauce.
yeah, 8 hours is pretty excessive.
Right.
I mean,
8
I feel
hours
like
and
you could
5
probably get
years.
away with 2 years.
2 years.
Not 2 years. 2 hours. What is time?
Yeah, totally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that you have produce enthusiast in your bio because you've influenced me on more than one occasion to like go out and buy a very specific vegetable or fruit, or like I feel like we've bartered on various occasions for very good produce.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is your favorite extremely local produce thing that you look forward to every year?
Oh, well, so you and I this last summer cooked apricot jam from Joy, but not just apricot jam. It was specifically robata apricot jam from Baird, which I think is the most exceptional apricot that you can find. And then also Ostiana tomatoes, which have, anybody familiar with that tomato knows that it's just an exceptional sauce tomato. It has this really fantastic story of the folks at Ayers Creek eating a meal in Italy, fishing those seeds out of the compost, bringing them back to the Willamette Valley, spending a decade, climate adapting them so that we could have access to them consistently in Oregon. And I just think they're an exceptional tomato. And if those were the two varieties that I wish that everybody could try and incorporate into their cooking, those would be the two. Absolutely.
I agree. That robata apricot jam is, I don't even like jam that much. I don't eat it that much, but the apricot jam is my favorite of all the jams I've ever made.
For a really long time, I was making Marionberry thyme Meyer lemon jam that was really well received. And then after making this apricot jam this last summer, and it's, as good as the robatas are, it's the orange juice in that recipe that I think is the hidden ingredient that nobody knows why it's so good, but it's that really good apricots and orange juice.
I remember how this got started for us was that we were looking for Blenheim apricots at the farmer's market, and we asked the folks like, hey, do you have any Blenheims? And they were like, you don't want Blenheims. You want robatas.
Yeah.
And we trusted them.
No offense to Blenheims.
Yeah.
I feel like robatas just grow better up here.
Yes,
Me
I think
too.
so.
It would be interesting to have peak season robatas and Blenheims side by side.
Well, and Blenheims are, the arc of taste, the slow food arc of taste has preserved that as a, heritage variety. And it is also a really great apricot. But yeah, it doesn't grow as great in the Pacific Pacific Northwest as the robata does. So, California, enjoy your Blenheims.
That is pretty much the one preserve that we need to make every year now. I feel like it's been 3 or 4 years that we've done it. And especially this time of year where it's early January when we're recording, but now it's a perfect time to have that apricot jam. It just feels like you're kind of importing a little sunshine onto onto your toast. It's just very essential.
And we've yet to make enough to get us totally through the year. So this year we need to figure out what that perfect amount is to stock.
Right.
Because we give it away a lot too.
It's my favorite thing to give away now. That and jars of pasta sauce are always really well received. You feel like a superhero. Because you are. Look at what you've done. But yeah, I think you and I, do we split a case? Like a 20-pound case?
Yeah, I think so.
Let's go full case.
Yeah.
All right, great. Sounds good.
Before we move on to our tasting segment, we have a special message from our co-producer, Dirk Marshall.
Hi, this is Donna from Chicago, and I am a huge fan of your podcast. I recently rediscovered the joy of cooking, and I'm eager to refresh my cooking skills for the new year. I was intrigued by the book's long history and various editions it's gone through. A deep dive into the evolution of joy of cooking would be fascinating for your listeners. To make your podcast interactive, I'd love to hear you feature one recipe from Joy of Cooking on each episode. Listeners could then cook that recipe during the week and share their joy on the hotline or social media. This would create a wonderful sense of community and a shared cooking experience. Donna, thank you so much for listening to the podcast and sharing your fantastic idea. Inspired by your suggestion, we're launching a new segment called Joy Scouts Cooking Club. Each week, we'll feature a recipe from the 2019 edition of Joy of Cooking that aligns with our weekly theme. You're invited to cook along. Feel free to tag us at Joy of Cooking using hashtag Joy Scouts Cooking Club to share your culinary masterpieces on Instagram and check out what other Joy Scouts are cooking. And Donna, don't worry, we'll keep digging into Joy of Cooking history, so stay tuned.
So we'll do some episodes about Joy of Cooking history, but we love this idea about having a recipe club, and we think that would be super fun. So we're going to start it this week. Because our theme for today's episode is olives, we have chosen an olive recipe that we are asking everybody to make if you like olives. John, do you want to share the recipe?
Sure. There are plenty of recipes in the 2019 that incorporate olives in various ways, but I redeveloped our Muffuletta recipe, the olive salad specifically. And I remember it was like one of the few times that when I had arrived at the final version and I just did a taste test, I had trouble stopping.
Yeah.
I just wanted to eat it as a salad. It's not supposed to be served as a salad, and yet there I was. So
yeah, and I feel like that was rare at the time because when we were in the midst of developing and testing all of those recipes, it was really just let's make it, let's taste it, make notes about it. If we need to, we'll retest it, but move on to the next one.
Right. Well, especially with something like the olive salad for the muffuletta. We had already made the muffuletta at some point and we knew that it was a pretty solid recipe. I mean, it's a sandwich recipe. It doesn't require a ton of, it's not rocket science. There was a class of recipe where we were just okay, we are dotting the I's. We are crossing the T's. This one is great.
In fact, we actually talked about separating out the olive salad recipe from the muffuletta sandwich because it's so good on its own. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we would encourage everybody to try the olive salad recipe that's part of the muffuletta recipe. Just try it on its own. You don't have to make the muffuletta. You can if you want. That's delicious as well. But yeah, the olive salad is kind of like a tapenade, but it has giardiniera in it and roasted red peppers and capers and garlic. It's just super flavorful and it's really good on, it's just good on crackers. It's good on all kinds of sandwiches.
Yeah, we would love to know what people use their olive salad for. Yeah, and also for those who don't mind a little spice, don't skip the pickled jalapeno, the optional ingredient. Yeah, you could use pepperoncini, but the jalapeno, my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
And for anybody who might not have the 2019 version of the book, where can we find that recipe?
For those who do have the 2019 edition, it's on page 137. For those who don't have it, yeah, we'll share it on social media along with, when we send out the next podcast, when the next podcast goes live. I don't know if we'll do that for every single recipe. That's kind of a lot. But for this first one, we'll do the olive salad.
Yeah, and I know a lot of libraries carry the 2019 version too for anybody out there. Go to the public library, check to see if they have it. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the ebook is probably available on Libby as well.
Mm-hmm. And that leads us nicely into our tasting segment. And since today's theme is olives, we're going to try some olives that our producer has set out for us. We've got chili lime Frescatrano olives. Has anyone heard of these before? That variety?
It sounds like a
No.
Castelvetrano.
It looks like a
Right.
Castelvetrano.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it has chili and lime.
Fruity and spicy, it says.
Yeah, Castelvetranos, we call them out by name several times in the new edition because they are definitely one of our favorites.
They're so buttery.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Love that about them.
And the texture, very meaty
Yeah.
texture. I don't know if meaty is quite the word, but substantial texture.
Substantial.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That is a very good olive. It's very similar to a Castelvetrano. And then we have these, the brand is Divina, tangerine and chili olives that I only recently had for the first time because someone brought them over to our house for a party. They are so
They're
good.
so good.
Still have it at home and I dip into it every day as a treat.
This specific brand, though, because you and I have had these like version of this long ago. I think
Yeah.
of you always when I have those olives in my home.
Really?
Yeah. For context, Megan and I were working at a culinary creative agency and we ate a lot of food together. And there was something that felt really revelatory about dried tangerine peel and olives. I don't know. She grew up in a small town, guys. Doesn't take much to impress, I guess.
Big sections of orange peel. That's one of the additions we made to our marinated olive recipe in the 2019. It's definitely like something really nice about having orange essential oil flavor going on.
Well, like with the apricot jam we were talking about earlier, adding orange juice to that, there's just, it brightens. It's not just the like acidity that brightens it up, but yeah, the oils and the peel get in there and add so much flavor.
It's like
It's
the
so
perfect
good.
supporting note. It doesn't taste like an orange olive.
Mhm.
These
It's an
are-
olive that's really humming.
These are really the best olives. The Divina tangerine and chili olives. They're so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those will be at every party that we host from now on. Oh, while I was doing some olive research in preparation for the show, and I was really just curious about those canned black olives that you get that are, you get them on taco salad and 7-layer dip and stuff like that.
Yeah, you put them on your fingers
Finger
when you're
top
young
Yes.
and you pretend you're eating
Finger olives.
Yeah.
The primary reason to buy those olives.
Love them.
But I was really curious about them because they're very odd. The flavor is kind of strange and they have a funky, I don't know, they're just like, what is going on here was my thought. Most olives are cured either just with salt or with a brine. These black olives, they're not cured. They're treated with lye.
Oh.
Yeah, they're picked green.
They're picked green, treated with lye, and they turn black over a period of time.
Yeah, lye and oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
So the black is actually them becoming oxidized.
Yeah. The process was invented in the late 1800s by a German widow named Frida Amann. And she was using a recipe from the University of California. And she sort of turned her back porch into like a olive making factory
Interesting.
and figured out this process. And then her olives became really popular. And she actually moved to the East Coast to explore like new markets for her olives. They started packaging them in glass jars. I think originally they were selling them just out of like big wooden vats, but they started packaging them in glass jars. But because the olives are treated with lye, they're alkaline. And when you seal something that is not acidic in an anaerobic environment, you create a really good place for the bacteria that causes botulism to grow. And that is exactly what happened, not specifically with her olives, but with another, like a competitor's product. There was a case where 7 people actually died in 1919 from eating black olives that had Clostridium botulinum in them. And so after that, they started processing them in cans at 240 degrees under pressure, which will kill everything. But that's why they're in cans mostly. I thought that was just like a
That is-
fascinating story.
Yeah, you're right. Because a lot of when you go to the olive section in the grocery store, most of them are in glass jars,
Mhm.
except for the like black olives. And I think there are some whole green olives that come in a can too.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, wild. So happy that we have we have figured some things
Yes.
out anyway.
yes.
Do you like those the black olives, the finger olives?
Kinda, yeah. It's not going to be like the first choice for me
Yeah.
in the olive department, but occasionally I might just get a little bit of a hankering for, mostly just because they remind me of childhood and like going to like family parties, and they were always on the vegetable plate. And again, I would put them on my fingers and pretend I was ET. And sometimes as an adult, we also need to do that.
Yes.
So they don't fit quite the same on my fingers these
No,
days,
the
but
split.
yeah.
But they sell them in those tiny little jars
Yeah.
of sliced, which I think is the correct, because like how many times are you going to eat nachos?
Right,
Mhm.
exactly.
How many olives do you need?
Yeah.
You're not going to use the leftovers.
No.
You're not going to snack on those leftovers.
No.
I always think they taste a little metallic.
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They taste soapy.
Yeah.
Because of that alkalinity, like they're
Right.
just like a little soapy. But they are perfect on, you're right, they're perfect on nachos,
Yep.
the taco salad thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's just times when you
What's
need
a
them.
7-layer dip without that?
Nothing.
Nothing. So an endorsement and a slight criticism of black olives at the same time.
So, Anna, you've worked at farmers markets for a really long time.
Mhm.
How did you get started working behind the booth?
I had lived abroad for a long time after college, and I had just moved back. One of the reasons why I moved back was really missing grocery stores. I was living in South Korea, and there's obviously plenty of food resources, but there's nothing like walking into the slightly manic experience of a American grocery store. So I was really excited to come back and explore food as an adult, and then was at the farmer's market one Saturday talking to a farmer about his honey, and he just was like, "Hey, would you ever consider working for us?" And I was like, okay. And it was kind of a dreamy summer, right? Like kind of getting immersed in that community and that culture and talking about food all the time. And then, all of a sudden, 7 or 8 years later, I was like, oh, this is kind of like part of your life now. And did take a break. And now I'm back. So come see me at PSU.
What's your favorite thing about working at a farmer's market?
It's the community.
Yeah.
It's seeing the same people every week, when you're looking the day ahead at the weather and you're like, well, it's going to be 37 degrees and raining. You're not there because you love to stand in that. You're there because you really love the people that you see. And I think anything that you can do to contribute to a durable, sustainable local food system is important. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a farmer to do that. Just, it takes all of us doing every little bit to promote that type of eating and shopping. And so I'm happy to, be a part of that and to help remove barriers for locals that want to shop that way.
What advice do you have for folks who want to incorporate more local foods into their cooking?
Oh, well, gosh, we've really done a disservice. And this is me now, speaking with the hat of somebody that now works in retail, but has previously worked at a large distributor and has done sales. We've really done a disservice to ourselves for creating this totally unattainable standard of what produce is supposed to look like on the shelf. And so, when you're going to the farmer's market, you're going to be exploring options that are not as homogenized as what you find at the grocery store. And so just getting over it. Just get over it.
Yeah.
You're going to see ugly things. Often they're more beautiful in flavor, right? Like learning to recognize that a blemish, like for example, on a piece of fruit actually means that that piece of fruit has produced more sugar to help heal over that blemish. And so really just like taking an interest in what you're actually bringing into your kitchen. Because if you're just there for like, if you're shopping locally just because it's sort of stylish, you're going to burn out, I think, because it is more expensive and it's inconvenient. That's the advice that I would give. And if you aren't really wanting to be that invested, if you're not wanting to like deep dive educationally for yourself into growing practices and variety selection and who the growers are, et cetera, just go spend money.
Yeah.
That's fine too. That's not a litmus test for, how successful you are. But I personally have found really understanding varieties more deeply has been what I've found the most engaging about bringing local food into my kitchen.
So I'll confess that I have a love-hate relationship with farmers markets more
Correct.
broadly because I get overwhelmed
Right.
with mostly just the number of people.
It's strollers and
It's a lot.
it's slow walkers and
But I love talking to the vendors
Mhm.
and asking questions about the stuff I'm buying or like what do you think is really good right now? Like what should I make with this thing? Because they're so full of knowledge and it's easy to go and just buy the thing you want and walk away.
Mhm.
But I think there's just like a wealth of knowledge at the farmers market in the vendors and the people who grow the food.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, two-edged sword or whatever. I mean, if you're actually having a little anxiety because there's a crowd at your farmer's market, that means that you're at a really good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Typically.
It's the sad truth for me, I guess.
or else there's a lot of crafts, which nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Get up early. We're up early.
Yeah.
You know?
How early do you get up when you're working the farmers market?
When I would, well, so now I have a little bit more of a plum gig with a CPG product, but when I was managing a produce stand, it was, like 3:30, 4 a.m. wake up time, which is even luxurious compared to, if you're in Portland and you're buying food from anybody that farms in the Willamette Valley, those people, Groundworks, GTF, Eloisa, all of those familiar names, they've been up since 1:30, 2. They've been on the road since before the sun has come up.
So just for my benefit and maybe our listeners, what's CPG?
Consumer packaged good, like a product.
Got it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when I worked at the farmers market, I was getting up at 4,
Mhm.
which felt so inhumane. But yeah, you're right. Like the farmers themselves are up before that,
Right.
harvesting or preparing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, if you're like, oh man, the farmer's market opens at 8 and that feels really early, does it? I don't know. Everything is relative.
Well, this is good ammunition for when I try to motivate Megan to go to the PSU farmers market.
See, this is why we've signed up for a CSA though, because now we get the local produce and I don't have to go to the farmers market every week. I think we still go for like specific, like the robata apricots, the tomatoes. We go for the New Mexico chilies when they're in season. There are specific things we'll go to the farmers market for, but I do like having a source of local produce that comes to me sort of.
Absolutely. I mean, the other benefit of the farmer's market is that you can kind of look over shoulders and be like, what are those people doing? And get some inspiration there. That's what I do. And like I see somebody that I recognize, I'm like, oh, I trust you. What are you buying?
Well, when I see you walking around the farmers market, I'm going to be looking for this behavior.
Yeah, right. Tag along.
Yeah, let's go spy on everybody.
Yeah, totally.
Anna, what is in your fridge right now?
Oh,
If you can remember.
Well, yeah. There's a lot. I made some yuzu kosho. That's still in there.
Could you talk a little bit about what that is?
I could talk about that. Yeah, it's yuzu is a variety of citron, so it's really bitter with skin that's really laden with oil. And yuzu kosho is sort of like a paste that you take the rind, remove the pith, use some sort of chili. Traditionally it would be a Japanese chili, but in this case I used bird's eye chili because that's what I had, and a bunch of salt, and you just grind it into a paste, and you can use it in miso soup, or I marinated chicken thighs with it, and it's just kind of one of those, like, what do the French call them, mother sauces? Yeah, I'm not a classically trained cook, so my mother sauce is like that type of thing, right? Like interesting, spicy
Mother paste.
Mother paste, yeah. Like that's one thing that like I'll want to have in my refrigerator every winter. So I've made that for the past couple of years. And then, half-eaten jars of jam for sure, always. Lots of those. And then leftover meatballs, because I did make 2 pounds of meatballs.
Oh, yeah, you said that you made a lighter meatball.
Yeah.
Were you incorporating ricotta, or were you using like a white meat?
No, well, so it's traditionally our family did like a straight beef, which I think is a little bit of a crime. That is a dense meatball. So I do like 50-50 pork and ground beef, and then eggs, 1 egg per pound. So in this case, 2 eggs, and then like an eyeball of a like half cup or so of breadcrumbs, and then
Oh, I thought you were like talking about eyeball like it's a unit of measurement.
that's a unit of measurement, is it
Such
not?
a creepy unit of measurement.
Like the size of an eyeball.
It's about a tablespoon and a half.
Right.
Yeah.
Not like a large grape, it's an eyeball. Or a tablespoon, as people commonly use. And then like half a cup of Parmesan. And then the volume of garlic and fresh basil is determined by whatever I have on hand, because I don't want to ever have leftovers of fresh garlic. So in this case, it was like a whole 8-ounce bag. That was pretty herby. And then I had like 3/4 of a head of soft neck garlic. So that's, many, many, many cloves. Like if I tell you that it's like 15 cloves, know that it's like teeny tiny little cloves. But all of that because I wanted to be rid of that. So that was like a pretty garlic heavy meatball. When you're forming them, I always get a little bit afraid that they're going to break apart in the sauce. And I have to remind myself that like you're going to fry them. We are a fry house. And then once you get them into the sauce, they're going to firm up and hold their shape. But the end result is like a pretty supple, lighter meatball than the like really dense ass beef one that I grew up with.
Do you always fry or do you broil sometimes?
I have broiled before. I've also done like raw into the sauce as well. And yeah, a poached meatball.
For some reason, that just does
That
not.
sounds a little wrong.
I don't enjoy the process. I don't enjoy visually putting raw meatballs into a sauce. There's just nothing enjoyable about that to me. But like standing over the fry and like flipping the meatballs and like, sometimes you're kind of in a rush. And so it's like a light fry. And then, yesterday I had like a good amount of time. So it was like a really like thick crust on those meatballs. And that felt like really satisfying. And that's just not something that you get from a broiler. So do I think that the end result with the broiler is better or worse? I don't know, but I just don't like doing it as much.
I really like broiling, I have to say. I mean, they don't turn out like balls. They're more like mounds, but I don't know. I feel like I'm cheating, and that goes a long way.
You do like we've talked about this many times how you like those kinds of processes like browning meat for a braise or caramelizing onions because you kind of just have to stand there and you can't you can think your thoughts but you're stuck at the stove for a little while, which is kind of a nice thing sometimes.
Yeah, no, it's forced contemplation, like in a not go to your room kind of way. Yeah, it's like by your own volition.
Yeah,
and of course you're trying to achieve something that is going to be delicious. I do appreciate that. I don't know, frying meatballs for some reason that it's not scratching the same itch for me, but it's just me.
I think meatball off.
I absolutely.
Yeah, let's do it.
Anytime.
Okay.
And like to be extremely competitive, it's on, Shannon. So good.
Wait, you competitive?
It's so weird.
And aside, you mentioned yuzu kosho, and I just wanted to give a shout out to Heather Anderson,
friend of the pod,
and guest for our first guest. Yeah. So she just recently published a recipe on the Super Abundant blog for yuzu kosho that she offers a really awesome substitute that I would like to try, and that is like yuzu, fresh yuzu, especially very hard to find. So she offers like a substitute where you can use lemon zest and then add some cedar fronds or pine fronds. Because I guess that yuzu, there's, in addition to like the typical citrus oils that are in there, I think it's limonene. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but there's also pinene, and so you're like kind of making up for the lack of pinene that's in the lemon.
Interesting.
Yeah, I want to try it.
Yeah, I'm curious. I want to try that.
That sounds amazing.
Each week we choose a topic to tackle based on caller suggestions, and this week we're talking about olives.
Hi, Joy of Cooking podcast. Do you have any favorite recipes that use olives? No specific kind. All olives are welcome. Thank you.
I appreciate how general this question is. Like, tell me how to use olives, which I can do that. The first thing that came to mind for me was this soup that we make all the time in the winter. It's called Asopao de Pollo. It's a Puerto Rican chicken and rice soup, and it has it's really hearty and a little bit spicy. I think it has one habanero pepper in it, but you could totally omit that or just use half. And then it has green peas and sliced pimento stuffed olives. And the olives just add this really, whenever you get like a piece of olive in a bite, it's just this briny, delicious, I don't know, the texture is really soft and good. There's just something about the olives that really make that soup for me.
Vaguely related is also like the Veracruz style tomato sauce that we added. I love that. And it's a tomato sauce that has like true cinnamon.
Talk a little bit about that. What's true cinnamon?
It's canela, and also referred to as canela at Latino markets. Yeah, it just has this really nice, like The cinnamon that we're mostly familiar with is also it's cassia actually, and has kind of a hotter like kind of profile to it. Um, but yeah, I don't know. There's just something about the Ceylon or true cinnamon that adds a really nice flavor to the sauce. There's some capers and some olives in there. It's really good for either topping fish or actually braising fish in. That's I think there's a kind of a classic Veracruz style snapper dish that it's the sauce for that.
Want to do a shout out for your Puttanesca sauce, which is our go-to. I know you have something to add about that, John, but it is delicious. I remember camping with you one time, and that was what you made.
That's a great camping recipe.
It was so good. It just was like everything I wanted.
Hits the spot.
And the like oily tuna in it was just incredible.
I'm gonna have to look at our recipe again. I feel like the tuna was something that we added.
Oh, I think the tuna is not actually in the
Yeah,
recipe, but we add it,
Add that,
especially when camping, because you want that the
Yes.
protein.
Yeah, we were looking
or when
yeah.
you're not camping.
or when you're not camping.
I feel like we want to make a slight change to the Puttanesca recipe, just
Yeah.
because it calls for quite a bit of olive.
A lot of olives.
Especially if I don't know. I think there was once in particular where I used the the wrinkly salt cured olives, and I just felt like we at least need to warn people, like, hey, maybe
don't use
maybe
those.
have the amount for like the salt cured olives, or just use a milder olive.
Use a mild olive, add oily tuna.
Yeah.
Next version.
Oh, making notes right now in my head.
So Niçoise salad is another recipe that we love making all the time, especially in the summertime. And we always include olives in that, Kalamata olives. It's a Niçoise salad, so you
Right,
should
it's
probably use
supposed to be.
Niçoise olives, but we usually have Kalamatas on hand. It's adaptable. It's fine. And then another recipe that came to mind is pan bagnat, which is a French pressed sandwich. So it's kind of like Niçoise salad in sandwich form, except it has eggplant in it. So it has roasted eggplant, roasted peppers. What else? It has tuna. It has olives. Spoiler. But the key to that sandwich is you actually do want to once you assemble it, you want to smash it between two heavy things. Or like I remember, I cannot remember what book this is in, but
Maybe not smash, smoosh.
Yeah, smoosh, compress.
Yeah, not a sandwich press like panini.
Yeah, not a panini press, just something to compact it. But I remember reading something from MFK Fisher where she tells a story about someone sitting on the sandwich on the train, like until they got to their destination.
It was like smooshed and warm.
Yes, which now that you say that, it sounds really weird. But I thought that was kind of a fun way of thinking about it.
Pro tip for you commuters out there.
Yeah, sit on your sandwich. Just wrap it really well. And then the last recipe that came to mind for me was there's a roasted cauliflower with green olives and lemon in the 2019 edition. It's really simple. You just roast them all together and you're using lemon slices. So the lemon slices get a little caramelized in the oven. It's best to like chop them up a little after roasting because you don't want to eat like a whole lemon slice at once. But it adds a really nice bitterness and a little bit of sweetness. And then I definitely recommend serving that cauliflower with some kind of like a savory yogurt sauce of some sort because I find roasted cauliflower to be a little bit dry. It just needs a little help at the end.
Yeah, and that's one of the many instances where we call for Castelvetranos because they are God's olive.
God's own olive. Anna, what do you like to use olives for?
I'm going to be honest that I don't often.
You don't use olives?
I don't. They're just not something that like I'll bring them into my kitchen for like a cheese plate or, if we're doing like a snacky thing. It's just not a component that makes its way onto my grocery list that often. But an endorsement of Puttanesca, when I do have a bunch left over, they're probably going in pasta. I think it's really easy to build a pan sauce with them also. So like if there's roasted chicken thighs with some olives tossed in and drippings and a little bit of wine, that's a really good dinner. So yeah, sorry, guilty. I'm the number one guest to have on an olive episode.
Those were good answers, though.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have you tried marinating olives with like an infused oil or anything like that?
No, but that sounds delightful.
Yeah, it's good.
Are you talking about like fresh olive, like
No.
what kind of olives? Oh, like other people's olives. I'm building on
Other
it.
people's olives.
Other people's olives, yeah.
Other people, OPOs.
Yeah, no, I mean like I'm just talking about doing something kind of like the tangerine and chili olives that we just tasted, but just, starting with plain olives
Yeah.
and then going from there.
Zhuzhing an olive.
Yeah, zhuzhing.
No, but it sounds like something we should maybe do. Let's
That's
have a weekend.
Okay.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
do it.
Great.
Yeah,
Olive
no,
party.
I'll get the cheese and
Do we still have instructions in Joy for curing olives?
we used to. We tried it. We failed.
We did try. We occasionally will see fresh olives in one of the little specialty markets here, and
Yeah,
one
Barbara-
year.
Barber World Foods. Shout out to Barber World Foods. And yeah, LaBouffe, sometimes
Yeah,
they
they
have fresh
will.
olives.
And we did try brining them ourselves. And you really have to, they're so bitter that you have to do several changes. I think we actually soaked them in water. We soaked them in water for several days, maybe even a week, changing the water every day to get rid of some of those tannic properties of the olive, to make it palatable. But I think even in the end, after changing the water like 7 times and then doing a salt brine for a long time, they were still on the bitter side of, yeah, they just weren't quite there. So kudos to the people who make olives taste good, because they're so delicious when they're right, and when they're not, they're not good.
Yeah, try making your own to appreciate it, just to appreciate what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. I did get to go to an olive orchard,
Is it
what do you
farm
call
or
it?
orchard?
Farm? Grove.
Grove.
That's right. Olive grove.
Good job.
I got to go to an olive grove during harvest a couple years ago, and that was a amazing experience to see
bet.
the olives from harvest to bottling, and like just the smell
Well,
was
for olive oil.
incredible. Yeah, for olive oil, not for olives, but yeah. And that smell of the olive oil was just it permeated everything. It was magical.
And olive trees are so beautiful too.
Mm-hmm.
They might be my favorite. Love them.
Yeah. If you have a topic, ingredient, or joy story to share, call our hotline at 503-395-8858. Leave us a message or send us a text. We'd love to hear from you. Next week's topic comes from our caller.
Hello, I'm a big fan of the Joy of Cooking podcast. It got me really thinking about my cooking memories, and I remembered my mother, a true improvisational cook, teaching me how to make an eggplant casserole when I first moved into my small adobe house in Katati in 1970. I tried to find her exact recipe in Joy of Cooking, but it wasn't there. She probably combined elements from different recipes, as she often did. She gave me a heavy cast iron pot, and I'd layer it with sliced eggplant. Any idea what this casserole was? Dave Stone, Petaluma, California.
It's a mystery. I love it.
It is a mystery.
Mm.
We get these kinds of questions sometimes, especially on social media. And my follow-up question is, do you remember what else was in it? Because
or just what edition?
yeah, what edition?
What
What
did
did the cover look like?
Yeah, what did the cover look like? People hardly ever know like what year it was published, and understandably.
But we'll do some digging. We'll dig around in some old editions and see what eggplant casseroles come up. I'm sure there's a few, and we'll try to answer that question next time.
It all comes back to eggplant.
Oh my gosh. It does
Again.
all come back to eggplant.
The apple of madness again.
Shannon, what are you doing this week? What are you cooking?
I have a few things. Well, I'm going to the farmer's market after this. So again, I'll get inspiration there. That's what I like to do. Green curry has been on the mind with
Mhm.
like tofu and veg. I don't know. That just sounds good. It's also surprisingly going to be nice this week. I mean, it's
Really?
still cold, but there's sun in the forecast. And I think I mentioned last week that we were going to maybe grill, but then jury duty happened. So I want to do some winter grilling this week. I think
Mhm.
it's time to like build a fire in our little chimenea thing and grill some root vegetables or something. I don't know.
Nice.
I'll get inspired when I get to the market.
Yeah, actually, after you mentioned your intention to grill, one thing I forgot to mention, we did some kalbi on the grill with some cheese corn. It was so good.
Oh yeah.
Cheese
The-
corn.
Have you had that?
Corn
I have.
cheese.
Oh, it's so good. It's ridiculous.
Is it corn cheese or cheese
Cheese
corn?
corn. I've seen it both ways. Do you know, Anna?
Well, I lived in Seoul. I should know. Corn cheese. I think it's corn cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
You're right. Yeah.
That is not a recipe that we have in Joy, but probably will be in the next edition because it's outrageous. And it's just like sauteed corn, and you can add onion, you can add diced, I think Mangchi adds like diced bell pepper for color. And then you add some mayonnaise to it and then top it with whatever kind of stringy cheese like mozzarella or something, and then broil it. And it's just one of the best things.
Well, I mean, it's corn and cheese.
It's corn and cheese. What could be bad?
Yeah. What about you all?
Well, yeah, I don't know. After doing all this olive thinking, there are Chinese dishes out there that call for salt-cured olives, Chinese-style olives. And I want to try doing like a fried rice with those Chinese olives.
Yeah, there's like a Thai dish that uses those Chinese olives, a rice dish.
Well, it's served at a restaurant that's really not that far away from us called Yaowarat. I think I'm saying that right. And they focus on like Chinese food that as it is served in like this on this one road in Bangkok called Yaowarat Road. So, but yeah, they've had a few stir fries with those olives. So.
And they're really, really good. Yeah, I think the one we had was with ground pork or something.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm also cooking a pot of Good Mother Stallard beans this week, which are one of maybe my favorite bean.
Can you explain why?
I just love the flavor. The texture's super velvety. Like they keep their shape really well, but they're not, I mean, obviously they wouldn't be hard, but they have this really nice velvety texture. The bean broth is really good. It makes a very thick and rich, flavorful bean liquid. So yeah, I would say they're my favorite bean. And they're hard to find too, because I think they're a little tricky to grow, but you only see them every once in a while. So I'll probably do pasta fagioli and freeze the rest.
Nice. Anna, anything on your menu this week?
Radicchio all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Right now. Always. Local growers have finally been bringing in Rosalba, the pink variety, in volume this season. So I'm eating that pretty consistently in salad form with different variations of dressings and toppings every single week, because when it's gone and you'll miss it. I'll miss it. And then there's also a lot of really great Asian greens at the market right now. So I picked up a couple bunches of what sort of looks like a rapini, but I know that it has sort of like, there's an Asian name, I can't recall what it is, but it's like a good sturdy green with little sort of like, looks like broccoli florets. So incorporating that into some sort of stir fry, because this next week is going to be busy. So every busy week is always stir fry week, because it's just so satisfying and you feel like a hero because you busted out the wok and it's really not that hard. So those two things. And then also have some beans that I set aside this morning from some local growers, La Miranda Farm, these blue Moro beans that are just gorgeous, and cooked them a couple weeks ago. And I would say that they're in a blind taste test. I don't know that I could tell the difference, but it's a bean that like is so beautiful when it's dry. It's so satisfying that's grown locally. So we'll put that into like probably a burrito bowl. Again, it's a busy week, so going for like comfort and ease.
And we'll all be making the olive salad from the Joy.
Yes, make the olive salad, post about it, let us know how you like it and how you're using it. Thanks for listening to the Joy of Cooking podcast. Before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts and iTunes. Follow us on Instagram at The Joy of Cooking. Stay tuned for next week, where we'll tackle eggplant casserole. Eggplant again. Call in with questions, hopes, history, or where you find joy in the kitchen. Our number is 503-395-8858. That's 503-395-8858.
And we could not do this without our fantastic team at the Joy of Creation production house. Thank you to Dave Drusky, our production coordinator, Haley Bowers, our audio engineer, and today, Dirk Marshall, our producer.